just joined, first of all, welcome. Thank you for taking time out to join us. The second thing is that we want to make sure you have the right view in front of you. So if you've used Zoom before, you'll know the difference between the speaker view and the gallery view. You want to be on the speaker view. If you haven't used Zoom before, then I would suggest that you look at the top right of the screen to the right of the pictures of us all. You'll see a little view button. Click the view button and you'll have the option of speaker or gallery. And if you're struggling with that, please let us know. Not that we're technical experts, but we'll certainly try and help you out. And whilst all that's going on, I'm just going to turn the light on because I can see my UK light is dimming the further and further we go into this call. So give me 1 second, I'll turn the proper light on.
And yes, we will send this later in case you cannot watch the whole thing. We're going to try to keep it to an hour, but you know how all of us vacation rental folks love to talk and talk and talk. So we'll do our best. We're passionate about this and we love to tell stories. So, but yes, recording will go out. And t-shirts. Yes, if you would like a t-shirt, let us know. We can hook you up. We can do something. No problem. All right, Andy, want to go ahead and start the welcome so that we can get moving here.
Yeah, definitely. All right, thank you everyone for joining. We had an idea a while back that we wanted to host a webinar on the idea of guests asking questions and the effect that had on the operations of running your accommodation business. But rather than it be just Tyann and I, much as we like each other and think we're great, it probably wouldn't be that interesting for you all. So we thought, what better way to cover the subject than to have 5 people representing different accommodation types. And that way, hopefully, you get a bunch of different perspectives. And I would definitely encourage you not to kind of check out if you're like, well, I don't have a camper van business, or I don't operate a Wigwam. Don't check out, because I should imagine that the answers you get will be illuminating. Well, I hope they will be anyway. And I think we all have probably an opportunity to learn from each other. So that's the logic of having this webinar. And we'll ask a few questions along the way. We'll get some hopefully pretty interesting responses. And if you have any questions that you want to ask throughout the webinar, there is the chat button at the bottom of the screen. Pop your chat in there, your question in there. And we'll do our best to answer them all. Given that it is a maximum of 55 minutes from now, so at the hour, we probably won't cover everything, but we'll take a note down of your question and get back to you. Tyann, all good? Anything else that I missed that I should say there?
Nope, I think you're good. I think it's my turn now.
Great.
I would like to introduce you all to our wonderful panelists. Panelists, if you wouldn't mind just waving a hand so people can connect to your face with your person when I say your name. Sorry. All right, so first I have on my list, I have Lorraine Galloway. She is an operator with Wigwam Holidays, Wigtown. Then we have Jayne Hancock, owner of Fields Lodge Boutique B&B. Next is Deborah Kane, founder and CEO of GoCamp. Andy Meddick, founder and CEO of Seachange Vacation Rentals, who we will be referring to as Seachange Andy during this time. And then we have Dean Carlson, owner of Villa Temenos. Good. And if you, and everybody, that's all the intros we're going to do of each person. If you would go to the webinar page afterwards and the email later, we'll have links to our panelists so you can learn more about them and about their properties and get in contact with them if you have any direct questions too. But panelists, we really appreciate you all joining us today, and I'm excited to learn from you as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Tyann. Right, let's crack on. So for those of you who don't know, I always refer to myself as a serial guest. I haven't operated accommodation businesses. I don't know the first thing about operating and all the challenges of dealing with people like me, the guest. But I do know the challenges that guests face. That was part of the reason why we created Touchday in the first place. And it was always that pre-booking I had questions, but then always after booking that I had questions. So we're going to treat this as the post-booking exercise. So I'd like to understand, the question's going to be, and I'll come to each of the panelists in turn, once a guest's booked, what is it in your experience that guests most want? So if I could come to, let's go to Seachange, Andy, for this question first.
Yeah, I think immediately right after they're booked, they want to have some kind of confidence that you are who you say you are. So they want some reassurance that they booked the right property. They really want a list of things that are needed for the stay, especially as they get closer to the stay. They might be calling the day before arrival, you know, what kind of coffee maker is it? Even though that's all in the guide and it's all on our website, they still want a live touch point with a person in the days leading up to arrival. And then they also want to know, in this day and age, they want to know a reinstatement of cancellation policies because of all these ongoing COVID issues.
Okay, excellent. Deborah, does that change at all in the RV/camper van world?
No, I was honestly just smiling, thinking, huh, indeed, it's so similar. I would say that the number one and number two things that guests need from us after they book a camper van to go on a camper van vacation is, number one, they want to know where they should camp. So they want recommendations on campgrounds. And then number two, similarly, they want to know exactly what's in the van. So for us, we call it the supply list. So they want to know about the bedding and about are there camp chairs and should I bring my own headlamp, that kind of thing. So supplies and recommendations on where to camp for us.
And I bet in the camper van world, it's immensely technical as well, the kind of things that they would want to know about. You know, how do I drive this thing and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
For sure. And, you know, we have 100 different vans on the website, 100 different guides and 100 different ways that the vans work.
That's a different challenge entirely. As we're on the theme of outdoors, Lorraine, in terms of the Wigwam business, what are the kind of things that guests want to know after they've booked with you?
The first thing they want to know from us is how to get to us, because we're actually quite remote and we're on a farm, so we're not near any towns, so that's a big thing. So directions is a big issue for us, and they also, not everybody's glamped before, so they want to know what to bring, what's provided, what extras we provide, and probably the biggest question is about the hot tubs, because that's a big seller for us.
Interesting. And I bet that's one of the things they get wrong the most times.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's lots of do's and don'ts.
All right, cool. Well, let's stay with the British theme, shall we? Jayne, what do you think?
Well, a bit like Lorraine, the most asked for thing is directions for how to get to us, because we are a little bit out of the way as well. Then the entry instructions for how to actually access the property. And then they're immediately thinking about what they can do on the first night that they stay. So they're very keen to know where they can go to eat, what can they do when they arrive, depending on what time they're arriving, and what things not to miss. So those tend to be the things that are asked here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. You mentioned the location difficulty, and I'm not going to ask you a follow-up question, but it's a nice segue into Dean, because I know that in Costa Rica, you don't have street addresses as such, do you? It's a bit more kind of turn left at the red pizza sign. Is that right?
It's a lot more complicated, correct, being in Costa Rica, and that's where having the Waze connection, which was actually beta tested in Costa Rica, so it's very, very useful down there. But I have primarily two different types of guests: the ones that go there for the activities and adventure, so they're interested in ziplining, snorkeling, diving, surfing, all those kinds of things. And then I have the guests, especially since COVID, that are going there for kind of the romantic getaway. They want the privacy. They want the massage therapist to come up. They want the private chef to come in and cook their meals. So they jump right to those types of questions. What can we do, and what kind of services can we have? Okay. And that's all. So I break it out in my welcome book to those different types of categories. So it's right there for them to explore.
Okay, so I think I didn't really get any surprises there. I think as a guest, I tend to find that I have a combination of the more practical elements, and depending on where I'm staying, those practical elements might be more intense. Like if I'm going to Costa Rica, I've probably got more practical questions, but I also want to know all the great things to see and do. So it's interesting that there's all forms had that kind of balance. Good. Next question. Let's do this a slightly different way. So I'm quite interested to know, since I've said I don't operate any accommodation businesses, I'm quite interested to know how much time guests take, meaning their questions they ask you, does that swamp you, or do you have tons of time? Or so basically I want to come to each of you really quickly, and I want you to tell me whether or not the guest questions are very few, quite a lot, or lots. And depending on the answers, we'll pick a couple of you to deep dive. So Lorraine, which of those three do you fall into?
So far, very few, but I think COVID has been a big changer on that. People want to know a lot more about our booking guarantee and what happens, you know, if COVID becomes an issue. So up until COVID times, I would say very few.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm going to come back to you on that then. So Jayne, what about you?
I'm quite a lot because of what goes on around here. So yeah, I'm quite a lot.
Okay, Deborah? That was no surprise to me. yeah, given the vehicles you've got, I'm not surprised. Andy, how's it over in the US?
I'd say a lot before TouchStay. And since we've been using TouchStay, the number of questions has definitely gone down by magnitude, but also the timing of the questions for us has shifted. It's shifted to closer to arrival. There's that blip right after booking, and then nothing, and then there's a little rush before arrival.
Okay, good shout out for TouchStay. Thank you, Andy. Dean, how about you?
I'd have to say very few. Of course, there's that rush at the first inquiry. You know, they want all these things that have come to mind they have to ask. And so as a consideration, I'll always answer those questions to begin with, and then instantly refer them or tell them that as soon as they reserve, they're going to have this very elaborate welcome book, you know, come in their emails with all kinds of information on Costa Rica, on the area, and on the home. So that seems to quiet down those questions considerably once they realize that.
And so maybe I misunderstood that. So is it because they've got the guide up front that they ask less questions, or does that come later? I'm quite intrigued why they ask less questions.
Well, they'll ask a lot of questions initially, but then in my response, I might answer one or two of their questions just as a consideration, and then I make them aware that they're going to be getting this great bit of information once they reserve. And then once they have reserved, every time I communicate with them, I still include my welcome book, so they start to see that, oh, hey, there's something to this.
Okay, all right. Lorraine, can I come back to you? Why? I'm intrigued why in the glamping world they don't ask many questions immediately. What do you think that is?
I think Wigwam Holidays is very good at giving a lot of the information before the book, and I think quite a lot of our guests are new to glamping, so they've researched it quite a lot before the book. We do have inquiries, but I wouldn't say that I'm swamped with them. We have very few up until maybe before COVID, as I said. That's been probably people have been checking more. And terms and conditions have changed over the last year. So yeah, that's probably been our biggest inquiry.
That's really interesting. So guests book a Wigwam stay through the Wigwam Holidays website rather than you kind of dealing with that directly at first.
Yeah.
And so as being a franchisee as part of that bigger network, you're essentially saying to me that probably Wigwam have a lot of good information on their website that answers those questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. That makes more sense. So that has a bit of a learning there, that guests are reading things about what it's like to stay with you, etc.
Yeah, but there's an overall Wigwam sort of information page, and then they then decide what site they would like to go to. So yeah, depending on what they want, they've got a tick box of hot tub, remote, you know, that kind of thing. So then they've already kind of picked what they want. So I think that eliminates quite a few questions for us.
Okay. Whereas Jayne, you're saying the reverse. You're getting lots and lots of questions, but you do have a website. So are they have you not got the information there, or you've got it but they're not booking through you or not reading it? What do you think is going on there?
Yeah, people have a question in their mind and they need it answered. So they will either send you an email, or if it's in person, they'll ask you. And then I've learned over years to either have these questions answered on the website or in my touch day guide. And so I will invariably answer the email, but I'll include a link to that particular section where that answer resides, because pretty much 80% of the questions that I get asked, I've been asked by hundreds of people before that. So what I have to do to answer a question is less, and it's a great way of pointing them to the touch day guide as well before they get here.
Okay. All right, well, that's a nice, Deborah, I'm not coming to you because I think it's obvious why guests ask lots of questions with the camper van world, so don't take that as an offence. It's a way of kind of speeding up. So next question is, what has been your learning curves in guest communication? So Jayne, I'm going to come to you, but I think it's probably more of a recap, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you've identified those same questions that get asked almost all the time, and you figured out a way to answer those in a really efficient way and point people to that answer inside your guide. Is that correct?
That's spot on. It's good for the guest because it's easy for them to access the information. It's good for me because it gets the guest onto the website or using my touch day guide, and that is improving the guest's perception of the experience they're going to have when they get here. One other learning I've had since doing that is I've now learned that maybe doing videos showing people how to access certain things helps for those people that don't read, because I've realized not everybody reads. Lots of people like to just look. So video is, I'm always improving my guide. Video is where I'm going with a lot of that now.
Yeah, I think video is quite underused. I'm always surprised that there's not more of it, and maybe that's just people are frightened of the production skills of doing it. But I've often subscribed to the view that I don't care if a video is not perfectly polished or whatever. I just want to know how the hot tub operates, for example. So just show me the panel and what you do. All right, that's interesting. So therefore, probably, although you're getting lots of questions and the same questions, they're not taking you nearly as much time to answer anymore as they used to. Would that be fair?
That's spot on now. It's a quick email with a link or a point to the touch day guide. It's much simpler now.
Okay, all right, excellent. Deborah, given you have tons and tons of questions, how have you addressed that? How have you come to learn the best way of dealing with those guest communications issues?
Well, I would say we're still learning, and I wrote down the thing that reflecting. For us, it's the notion that folks don't read. And, you can pour your heart and soul into creating all these different instructions and, renter policies and the rest of it. But a lot of folks just, don't want to sit down with all that information in print. And then beyond the notion that folks aren't reading, I also kind of have folks broken up into, there are the guests who will read and consume that information right when they book because it's top of mind and they're excited. But then there's the other half of the population that is going to ignore it upon booking, but then really need and want to access it the day before or the day of their trip. So we're really honestly hoping that the touch stay guides are going to help us, reach both types. And then I would add the other thing that's on my mind with regard to our operation is we're very much like Airbnb. So the camper vans that are listed on the GoCamp website are not owned by GoCamp. We're not a fleet management company in that regard. And so we also have the exact same issues with our van owners who sometimes are not reading the information that GoCamp is sending out, which is to say, GoCamp will say to 100 van owners, hey, 100 van owners, don't forget you need to put your insurance card that GoCamp gave you in your camper van. And 50 of them will do it and 50 of them won't. So again, with the touch stay guides, our ability to be sharing system-wide information at that macro level is a game changer for us.
So for example, they can put their insurance card inside the guide. So it's
We can put their insurance card inside the guide. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. We don't need to wait for you to read the instruction and do it.
Yeah. We can put everything that we need, inside the guide. I don't have to wonder whether or not John read the email and did the 6 things I asked him to do. I'll go ahead and do the 6 things for John.
I think that's really interesting. I mean, one of the things that I was going to ask you was, what things do you do to try to get guests to read? But you've almost shortcutted that. I mean, this is just an example, but you've shortcutted that by saying, look, I'm not even going to try and get my owners to read. I'm just going to do it for them. And it's easy for me to do it for them because I've got this touch day guide to do it now. But I always think it's quite psychological. Like, I mean, you can't make someone read something if they feel like there's no value in it for them, or if they just feel like it's another blah thing. Do you agree? Is there like some sort of tactic you can get them to pay attention?
Well, for sure, making the touch day guides super user friendly and gorgeous and, full of photos and videos, to Jayne's point. And, Andy, that we haven't launched our program yet, but we do have, 5 or 10 camper vans right now where the touch day guides are complete. And we have been piloting them with renters. And just anecdotally, it seems like when we text the touch stay guide to the renter and force it to land on their phone, as opposed to a link in their email, we get, oh my God, this is great, I love this, versus the email, which could still just never get read and they don't click on the touch stay link. But if, again, when we're just wanted you to have this on your phone, you're about to lose service, click right through, we're getting good feedback.
That's interesting. Okay, so it's the mode of delivery as much as what you're saying.
Yeah,
okay.
It seems to be.
All
so
right. Far. Andy, you're similar in the sense that you've got a lot of rentals. What, 60, 70 now, I think?
I think we're up to 75 currently.
75.
And those, we own 3 of those personally, so the rest are managed for others, similar to Deborah.
So you're getting a similar volume of guests. And are you finding that you've learned something over the years about how to get guests to pay attention to things and get them to read?
I think the main thing that I personally have learned is, I would say, is learning how to answer the guest questions. We are hospitality providers, and you can get a little bit frustrated sometimes if you're hyper busy and you're getting the same questions over and over again. So I guess it's reinforcing where to find the information without making somebody feel that they did a bad thing by asking you a question. Also using the opportunity for the question to set some boundaries and expectations, and in terms of managing their expectations for the stay, and really answering the question they're asking you, not kind of elaborating beyond what they're asking you, kind of keeping it simple when they're asking you a question.
That's a good point, keeping it simple. Yeah, okay. Dean, have you got anything different or a different perspective?
As far as the learning curve go, I think answering the questions before you receive them, and I say that it sounds simple, but after having years and years of experience in Costa Rica, I anticipate questions, so I put them into my guide. One thing in particular, a personal experience. Now, since COVID, or since Costa Rica has reopened November 1st, the country requires insurance as well as a health form to be completed. Now, to get back in the United States, you need to have a negative COVID test, as well as so there's a whole another layer of anxiety that the guest might have. So I've included now in my guide personal experience. I've gone through these processes, and I've actually put in there what to expect. So that's that comfort level. And I've found with a guest traveling, no matter where they are, the more information they have, the more comfortable they are, more relaxed they are, and the more they enjoy their stay.
Yeah, I would put myself in that group as well. It's not always that I want to know the answer to every question. It's the feeling that I've got the tool, that I've got the questions somewhere that can be answered. Right. And I think
I've included that as a very important category. I actually highlight it in capital. This is very important for you before you leave home. Know these things. I was able to go to the clinic when I did my test. The doctor, I took pictures of him. I took pictures of his staff in the clinic. So they're all right there, and that's for me, that's a very comforting type of thing for the guests to have that they
Yeah.
appreciate.
Yeah, big bold letters. Lorraine, anything different to add from the glamping world?
No, I think I would very much agree about the videos, that people certainly take more note of those. And I think from a personal point of view, my son's dyslexic. So if he was presented with lots to read, he would switch off. So that's why we use videos quite a bit, and also making sure that everything was quite clear and concise in bullet pointing things and making it easy just to scan over. Because we found people, or even from a personal point of view, reading loads doesn't work in our house for my son. So yeah, and also text messaging to people is definitely the best way.
You've hit something that we always talk about, is the need to be really concise in the written word, and where possible to bullet things. And one of the things that we always suggest when you're sending the guide to guests is that you bullet the 3 or 4 most frequently asked questions. And that enables the guest to know, well, first of all, that question's answered, but secondly, to know that there's something of value to follow. Like if they click this link in this guide, they are actually going to find something useful in there. It is really an asset to them. And I every Tuesday I do a tune-up Tuesday, some of you will know, on our private Facebook group, and I critique a particular customer's guide. And I'm often saying the same things, which is there's lots and lots of information on the page, and it needs to be kind of shifted into different category structures so that it's much more easy to find what you want. So I think that's a great point, Lorraine. Okay, excellent.
I think Seachange Andy has something to add here.
Go for it.
Yeah, I had a quick question as I'm listening to the other participants. How about mixed media types? Because when I asked my staff this question about their learning curve, they said, how do we cope with guests asking us questions in different ways? Some people only want to use text. Some people want an actual phone call. Another person will never get on a phone. They want an email. So that's been our learning curve, the appropriateness of the method of the touch point with the guest. And I think Lorraine kind of touched on it a little bit when she talked about her autistic son and texting. It's finding the appropriate media to use. And I don't have the answer for that. We struggle with that.
Anybody found the magic answer to that in the panel?
Not yet.
No, that's that. I mean, I guess that's seeing into the mind of your particular guest, which is hard. But it's interesting. It's one to think on how you could crack that nut of getting the guest to flag to you straight away how they prefer to be communicated with, and being able to deliver the content in that way. All right, good observation, even though we don't have the answer. Great, thank you. Tyann, how are we doing on questions? Is there anything that we need to answer now? Or we're going to wait till the end still?
Oh, wait till the end still. I'm collecting.
Okay,
We're good.
all right, good.
Yeah, but I do. Sure, I'll add to Seachange Andy his comment. We had a similar situation this week where the guest emailed, and then I went ahead and picked up the phone, left them a voicemail, and I said, you're welcome to call, text, or email, whatever's easiest for you. And she therefore proceeded to text us back. And she said, I'm hard of hearing. So I so appreciate that you will text questions back, and answers back and forth. And ultimately she did book, and she's excited, and, we've got an itinerary going for her. So I think part of it is just opening it up to the guests, saying we are available these ways and how you choose. And one of the biggest things we did, because it is myself and my husband, and we've been adding to our team, we made sure we had a phone number that is accessed by all team members. So when that text message comes in, all team members can see that and access that.
Cool, excellent, thank you. We didn't mention, I don't think, to everybody on the call that you own and operate vacation rentals as well. So yeah, and including a 10-bedroom house that you just built.
Yes, the 10-bedroom house, and now we're building another house, private indoor pool. You got to stay ahead of the game, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
All right, excellent. Right, next question. You've all kindly started talking about Touch Day already, which is, thank you, no prompting. But as Touch Day users, and Deborah will kind of leave you out this question, I think, for now, since you're just getting started. As Touch Day users, how has the digital guest guide helped free your time up? Lorraine, I know you're a bit of a fan of this in the COVID era. So what do you think?
Touch Day for us has been absolutely amazing. As you were saying about COVID, I'm immunosuppressed. So for me to meet guests was a big no-no. So that's actually what drew me to Touch Day initially. So it means that we don't have any personal contact with guests on check-in or check-out. But the biggest thing is freeing up our time, because we manned check-in and check-out, and people have a 2-hour slot to check in, and then they would text to say they were going to be late. They'd be 10 minutes late. That 10 minutes would be half an hour, 3/4 of an hour. So you were then manning maybe 3-4 hours as opposed to the 2 hours. So Touch Day has been a huge game changer for us in that respect. Freed up so much time.
And I think you said to me last week on the phone that you don't think you'll ever have to meet and greet a guest again.
Absolutely not. We will not be going back to meeting and greeting, because we've had so much lovely feedback about our Touch Day app and how useful it is. And, you know, in COVID times, people don't want to meet you either, but they're happy with the personal touch, with the videos. My son does videos on the Touch Day, so they actually get to know who you are, which I think we'll add in just a wee bit about us and just introduce ourselves on it. And if they want to see who they're staying with, they can do that, rather than just the text that says who we are.
Yeah, I think that's a nice touch, because there's something about what you said that's like, I don't mean this in the wrong way, it just kind of disappoints me a bit that you wouldn't need to interact with the guests again. And I know what you're saying. And so you've addressed that by thinking about how you can still convey a sense of you and who they're staying with and your personality through the use of photos, videos, history, about us, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we are still down on the site every day, because we've got hot tubs to check, we've got changeovers, so people do see us and they know who we are, and we will stop and speak. So they're still getting that personal touch. They just don't necessarily get that on the check-in, check-out. And people are leaving, we will ask, you know, how was your stay? Is there anything else you need? And also on the Touch Day, we say that we are with them 24/7 if they need anything. So, you know, they've still got that personal touch if they need it.
Got it. Excellent balance. All right. Jayne, in the B&B world, I'm guessing you'll always have to be there at check-in in some ways. Is that right?
Well, no, not so actually, Andy, because I have taken the same stance as Lorraine, really, particularly over the COVID time. And I have gone to a touch-free check-in. So the Touch Day guide helps me with that now, so that guests understand what's going to happen when they arrive. Because, like Lorraine has just said, sometimes I was here till gone midnight waiting for people, because people don't understand. So our guests have got their own entrance. They're not coming into my home per se. The Touch Day guide has been brilliant for that. So it's freed that up. It's also, I also use Google Forms now through my Touch Day, because we operate a pre-order breakfast, and we also operate an ordering form for what people might want in their rooms for servicing. And whereas then at 9 o'clock at night, I would go over to the B&B and collect all the breakfast forms to make sure I had everything that I needed for breakfast. Now the form is completed and I get it on my phone. The guests understand it, even 80-year-olds are doing it. So for me, the Touch Day from that point of view has been brilliant. And maybe COVID is the thing that pushed me into it.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about the use of forms to help you with breakfast orders or in-room stuff. But that's a really simple solution. And I'm very encouraged to hear that virtually everyone is using the form. They're not kind of scared by this, I have to fill in a form kind of thing.
No, as I said, I trialed it in the very beginning with some 80-plus-year-olds that were very technology averse. But COVID has helped because people are having to scan QR codes, etc., and they coped with it well. So I've got no excuse now for any guest.
The QR code's made a comeback, hasn't it, in this COVID world? All right, that's grand. Thank you. Dean, do you, or had you historically been meeting and greeting guests, and was that consuming any of your time?
No, being in Costa Rica, we're not there. So that's where the touch stay has been a game changer because of the time saving aspect of it. I can give detailed instructions step by step to get them to the house. And then I do have a caretaker there that does meet them and give them a little tour, that type of thing. But as in a foreign country where I have never really been there to meet a guest, the touch stay has been a game changer.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Andy, Seachange Andy, what's your take on whether the guest guides freed up your time or your staff's time?
I think Jayne already quite made a good articulate case for the point I was going to make. Seachange was already doing contactless check-in directly at the property before COVID. And we've been doing that for a number of years, really, to get ahead of the practicality of not knowing when guests are arriving, and then always confusion on arrival over a key. So what we've loved from Touch Stay as a team is that contextually the tool will it seems to fit neatly with any aspect of our operations. So we've been able to incorporate our digital key lock entry protocol into the Touch Stay guide. We're able to, when we go to a property, we label kitchen cabinets to show people with exhaust, we label light switches. We've been able to put a cross-reference in the Touch Stay guide to that to kind of preempt the question. And also from a hospitality standpoint, the guests may arrive, at 1 o'clock in the morning to a dark, unfamiliar property. There'll already be a light on, but the lights are also labeled, so they're not frustrated. So it's really Touch Stay for us is kind of anything that most things we were already doing, it's fair to say, as a business before Touch Stay, we've been able to integrate into the guidebook fairly seamlessly.
I like how you label everything.
It's not the prettiest thing aesthetically in a kitchen to see labels. They are neat labels, but we don't put them on until after we've taken the photographs, put it that way.
Good idea. Deborah, I know you're just starting with us in the Touch Stay journey, but what are your expectations? What are your goals in terms of time saving from using this?
Oh my goodness. I can't quantify, honestly, the time saving goals. I'll just say we are incredibly excited about joining the Touch Stay family. It is so clear to us that we're going to be able to provide better information to guests, and more uniformly better, I guess is another way to say it. Again, with 100 van owners, 50 of them are doing a great job getting good information to guests, but another 50 aren't, which means, for 50% of our customers, they're having an uneven GoCamp experience, right? So we want to create more uniformity around the awesomeness that gets provided to guests, and very much feel like Touch Stay will be a key piece of doing that. The other thing that we're really looking forward to with Touch Stay, honestly, is generating reviews. Because again, we hadn't, reviews was sort of the thing that van owners would spend a lot of time on getting the guests, driving away in their camper vans, and less time checking people back in and having those conversations about how was your trip, please leave me a review kind of thing. So we've actually embedded a lot of the review prompts and language into the Touch Stay guides. So we don't have any data to share today, but hopefully at the end of the year, we're going to see some pretty significant improvements in our percentage of guests who leave reviews.
Perfect. I know you didn't mean to segue so nicely into the next question, but perfect. I'm really intrigued to know what guests think of the guides. So obviously not going to ask you, Deborah, because you're not there yet. Let's go back to the start again. Lorraine, you've been using it for 6 months or so, I would assume, and through a difficult period. What's the guest feedback been like?
Guest feedback has been really good. They've got all of the information that they need. We've added anything in that we've found along our journey that's maybe needed, but they say it's a really nice touch and very personal, so that's all positive. I haven't had any negative feedback at all, which is all good.
Terrific. Jayne?
Yes, like Lorraine, I haven't had any negative feedback, and where I noticed that guests are enjoying the post-COVID touch stay compared to the pre-COVID touch stay is that my guest book now, which was a physical book in the room with ideas of where to go and who to see and where to eat, etc., that is in my touch stay now, so that they've got that on their phone, so they can remember now that they've only got to look at their phone to go to Folly Farm for an afternoon tea or something, whereas they could never take the actual book with them. And as I said earlier, even my aged guests have loved it. So there's been no negatives at all.
Do you still keep an in-room binder?
Not now. It's not perceived to be COVID friendly.
Okay, and you haven't noticed that that's had an adverse effect on the guest?
No, because the whole book is in the touch stay, which I know your team very kindly is going to tidy up for me shortly. But my whole guest book is in touch stay at the moment as well.
Great. Okay. Dean, what have you found from your guests in terms of feedback on the guide?
I think the adjectives awesome, fabulous. When you first introduce them to it in the first emails I send, I introduce them to the touch stay book, and you'll get this, thanks for this awesome guide. And then I think the ultimate is when you get mentioned again in a review. Deborah's, as she mentioned, to be able to use it for that. You've touched the right point in that guest stay if they mention your guidebook in their review.
And you've had that, have you?
Yes.
Fantastic. Excellent.
They don't go on and on and on about it.
No.
Sorry to say that, but no, they just appreciate that, again, providing the great communication. It has to do with your communication as well, and that's part of your communication.
Okay, terrific. Andy, how about at Seachange?
Well, I could just back up what Dean just said. We've had guests mention specifically in the review how great the TouchStay digital guide was. Overwhelmingly, guests love it. We haven't had a single complaint over it unless we've made a mistake in terms of data entry. And then that's quickly corrected as a human error. And I think to name one tool, the quick search function is probably the best tool that everybody loves, us and the guest. And I'm definitely going to look into the Google Forms when I get off this call, because we're not doing that yet. And my head is spinning with great ways we can use that.
All right, terrific. Thank you. We've come to the end of the questions. Tyann, have we got any audience questions?
We do. We actually have a question specifically about the last topic here. Catherine commented, she said she has a significant minority of guests who still prefer the printed books because they don't have a smartphone and they just simply prefer paper. So I was wondering from the panelists, do you have any guests specifically ask, is there another way to look at this besides this link? Or we don't have a phone, is there another way we can access this information?
I'll answer that then, Tyann. So far, I haven't yet had anybody ask me for the paper version back. My guidebook went completely into touch stay in July of last year when we were allowed to open. And obviously we've only been open a short amount of time during last year. We're still closed now. But during that time, no one asked me for the paper version because I think they all understood that it was classed as a high risk for COVID transmission at that point in time.
What about you, Seachange, Andy, since the US is a little bit different than the UK?
We've had, in a year and a half of using TouchStay, we've had one person ask, and they asked during the booking process, they saw that we were using digital, they wanted to have a paper copy. So we actually worked with another family member, and we got their email added, and we emailed to them, and they helped the primary guest with the digital guide. It was more of I think of a vision thing with this guest. They were quite elderly in terms of the size of the font on their phone, that kind of thing, and they just weren't technically savvy enough to alter their phone. And then the second thing I noticed, I did a turnover in the summer last year randomly, and I noticed that the guest had printed out the guide and left it at the property, which was kind of, you know, it only happened one time, but I kind of loved that they printed it off and they left it in a nice, neat binder. But, you know, it kind of shocked me that they printed it off. Nobody's ever done that since.
I know myself, we do leave a portion of the book printed because we do have that generation that doesn't want to access on the phone. They want the paper in their hand. So we have just the house manual part printed, but not our local recommendations, because the local recommendations we're always adding. So what I did is I made a graphic that shows the app in a phone, so the screenshots, so they could see what they're missing out on if they're just looking at the printed one. And then I have a QR code underneath it saying, you know, get to our local recommendations here. And then, so that is printed and with a nice cover and set to the side. What I found is most people actually have it opened on the checkout instructions whenever we swing by. But I've also got the checkout instructions and that QR code on the fridge and a laminated piece with magnet on there. So, you know, finding those different ways, because we host 4-generation families, and we've got to cover all the different ways that guests would be accessing the information. Okay, so the rest of these are more technical questions, Andy. Do we want to go over those, or do we want to talk a little bit more about Google Forms, chat forms?
I'm not really. I don't think it's a massively great idea to talk about technical stuff now. I think anyone that asked a technical question, let's definitely give them an answer afterwards. Okay. But I think the QR codes that you just mentioned is very interesting. As we picked up on this earlier in the webinar, that they have made a comeback, and they're so much easier to access now. You don't have to download an app to flip and read a QR code. You just point your camera at the thing. That is something that and you mentioned it, that's something that you've done really well, that you've got a laminated short A5 card that has some of the really pertinent info, but then a link, a QR code there for them to scan it. And I just wondered, do any of the panelists have QR codes sitting on the kitchen counter or inside the Wigwam, for example, or something like that, where guests who haven't necessarily seen it before they left have the access to access it when they arrive?
Yeah, we've got a QR code on the bedside tables, just in case. But I haven't had anybody that's arrived yet that hasn't downloaded it to their phone. So that's for a just in case situation.
Okay, and Dean, I think you were about to say something.
I don't use it, but Tyann just turned me on to that idea a week or so ago, and I think it's a great concept. And that's what I like about TouchStay. It's constantly evolving, and it's simple to use in those aspects. So it's exciting, and I'm gonna do it, because having that QR code in Costa Rica for the guest that hasn't downloaded it will be very helpful.
Excellent.
Might I add to our emergency information is right there next to it, as well as the Wi-Fi information. So, you know, emergency, Wi-Fi, checkout, and the QR code, all right there, eye level when you go to get food. So to me, that's the place everyone's going to go look. And then we've got a template that you guys can all access over on the TouchStay blog. That's exactly that setup. You can click on the Canva template and you can put in your own info and print it out so that you have that too.
We had an idea for a future product release, which was to have every single item in the TouchStay guide have a little button next to it that says generate the QR code for this particular item. So, and if you're labeling of light switches and things like that, you could literally already have a pre-configured QR code to go directly to that section in your guide. I'm thinking Deborah with the camper vans as well, maybe some of the trickier aspects that might be helpful. Google Forms, were there any questions about Google Forms, Tyann?
Yes, there's a few attendees who use Google Form and love it, such as Glenn. She uses it to ask the bed configuration, and then they have to also accept their TNCs. So there's a checkbox that the guest has to accept TNCs, and then also tell them what kind of bed configuration is needed. And then they put the QR codes next to the bed to their guide as well. So I thought that was an interesting use of Google Form, besides, in addition to the breakfast order. Then besides Google Form, there's also Jotform, which is used a lot. Personally, I use Jotform as well.
Okay, good. Any other questions that are of the sort of guest experience, guest questions nature instead of technical stuff?
No questions per se, but great comments from the attendees, and referring to that they use what 3 words to help with directions. Graham puts a family recipe for a cake, so for his guests, it's a recipe that could long be forgotten that he shares with the guest. I thought that was pretty cool. And reiterating, a lot of people are starting to use video more as well.
There's a question. So Tyann has many strings to her bow, one of which is she's an ace video editor and photographer. For those who are a bit, oh, I don't know how to produce a video, or what would you say to them in terms of things that help the guest?
Sure. So audio is the most important thing of video. Okay. So people will watch a really bad looking video as long as they can hear the audio really well. So make sure your audio is good. There's no other background noise going on. After that, maybe even just put your phone on a tripod. Your smartphone works really well. I'm happy to share one of my guidebooks that I'm holding the iPhone, and my husband Matt is doing the information. It's doing the actions, and sometimes he talks, sometimes I talk. And again, that helps introduce you as the host, the owner, the property manager as well. But that's the main thing. And if you're going to do something where you're just sitting at your desktop versus going out and doing something, or even just holding your phone and recording and talking to the person, I found Loom is really awesome. Just loom.com, and you can get a free account and do videos up to 5 minutes long for free. So I really enjoyed that one. But we have one more really great question that just popped up, Andy. And this one I think we should ask each panelist, if you guys could think of your answer here. At what point in the guest relationship do each of you share your guide? So at what point does the guest receive your guide?
Should we start with Lorraine?
Yeah, that's actually changing now, because I used to send my guide out about 2 weeks prior to arrival, but because Wigwam has taken on Touch Stay through the franchise, then that will go out at time of booking. So that has slightly changed for us. So I have to wait and see how that's going to work now. But initially I sent it out 2 weeks prior to arrival.
I'm not a fan of after booking. Well, I'm fine sending it then, but it's too early. You risk people forgetting it unless you send it again. So maybe that's something we need to try and figure out with them if there's a different way. Okay, Dean, when do you send it?
As soon as I send out a rental agreement, as soon as they've reserved, and as soon as that's completed, I send the guide to them. But I also include it in every single correspondence I have with them. So if when they return their contract, I thank them and include the guide. There's a period of time then where I'm not communicating until it gets closer to their arrival, of course. But then again, I remind them of the guide in that and ask if they have any last minute questions. If they've asked a question again that I've answered in the guidebook, I'll actually copy and paste it from there, and then mention that it is also in the guidebook and for their reference to answer this question and many other questions. So I keep pushing them there, and eventually they get it. But I find that the more I can touch them contact-wise, the better for the guide.
Yeah. I think that's a good strategy. If you can answer a question because you need to answer a question, but also then without being passive aggressive, sort of say,
Right.
and other things are in the guide as well, and here it is. I think
Right.
that's a good strategy. Yeah.
Because as it gets closer to their arrival, they're asking for directions. Well, the directions are very, very, elaborately. We want them not to get lost, especially if
Right.
they're getting there after dark. That's not good.
No.
They do have to push some codes. They do have to, open the gate. So they have to go up a steep hill, and there's no lights. So it's the comfort level, again, answering those questions in advance, the comfort level, so they're very comfortable driving up the hill and getting to the house.
Yeah. Okay, Jayne, anything different to add there?
I send mine out on booking, and then I send it out again when I send directions, which is a few days before. So they get it right at the beginning when they book, and then they get it again about a week before they're going to arrive.
Perfect. Andy, Seachange Andy?
On booking, which practically means that we have a commitment within 72 hours of booking, 3 days, and then 1 week prior to arrival. But we are currently looking at our whole protocol for guest communications. I listened to the Tumbleweed episode that you were on, Andy, with Heather Bayer on her podcast. And it's true, there's a big quiet period between booking and 1 week prior to arrival that we're not reaching out to guests. When they do call in, we do reinforce and send them out a link again if for answers or questions. Yeah, we're very similar to the other panelists.
Okay, good. And for those of you who don't know the reference, the tumbleweed thing is this experience I've had as a guest many times where I book and then I hear nothing from the person I'm staying with until either A, I ask something or much closer to the stay. And it's not about me being needy, it's just the fact that it's a really good opportunity to tell guests about stuff, whether you want to educate them on their arrival process, etc. Dean, go ahead.
I was saying, because we use our guide as a travel guide too. So I put lots of information there on snorkel trips, on the different things they can do. So I want my guests to go through there and plan their trip using my touch stay guide, and knowing that, oh, hey, that there were restaurant recommendations in there. I'm going to go there and look for those types of things. So the sooner I find, the sooner they have that, the sooner they start planning their trip. And reservations can come out a year in advance, and they can come out 3 weeks in advance. So it's
yeah,
using that as a travel guide, and that's my experience.
I found that to my cost in the summer when I took a break in the UK with my family, and it was in COVID time, and we hadn't pre-booked restaurants, and most of them were booked up. So just a dumb thing as a guest, I should have realized that, but I didn't. But that's an opportunity to interact with guests prior to arrival. Hey, by the way, did you know you should book reservations? Lots of recommendations in the guide, that kind of thing. All right, excellent. Well, we've run out of time, so I think, Tyann, unless there's anything of a huge nature that someone's asked, we should wrap things up.
Oh, there's a couple questions asking for specific links, so just let you guys all know. We'll put those in the email that goes out afterwards, along with the recording link.
Okay, and if somebody has a question that we didn't answer in that email that we send out, then by all means drop either Tyann or I an email, and we will try to answer that for you. Last of all, well, actually, second last of all, I would like to thank all of you for attending. It's been really interesting for me personally, actually, to hear the stories, but also to have the questions back from you. And last of all, panelists, massive thank you. It's been really interesting discussion. It's great to get your different perspectives, and I know it's an hour out of a very busy schedule, so thank you. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you all.
Good. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you later. Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Bye.